Right, okay, folks. Our first speaker in the breakout sessions is Kevin Gibbons, who's CEO at Resignal. Kevin's done lots of talks and worked with the likes of Expedia and Deloitte and Pottery Barn. And more importantly, he was named as Search Personality of the Year in the 2018 UK Search Awards, which is a real honour. So Kevin's talks on SEO strategy is going to explain why SEO strategy is so important. I will be learning everything because I need to tell my students this because it's a question they keep asking. And it'll set us up for the rest of the SEO stream today. So we've got some time for questions at the end. So please do add your questions into the chat panel and I'll ask Kevin some of these at the end of his talk. Take it away, please, Kevin.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen to make this easier. Do you know how I can minimize the... Can you see my chat window?
Or... I can see your chat window.
Oh, no, wait.
There okay, we go.
You got the screen. Perfect. Okay, so I guess to give you the background, so I'm actually curating the SEO track today, so I'll be on throughout the day doing the Q&A for the other topics. And what I wanted to do is we've got a great kind of combination of speakers that are going to go through various topics in all sorts of depth and detail. What I wanted to do is almost set the scene and take a step back. And in some ways, I feel like this is very fundamental, but also it's some of the stuff that I see that can be missed. And in SEO itself, we all get very excited and passionate about certain areas of the role, whether that's kind of technical SEO, content, digital PR, etc. And I feel like I'm advocating from my background of running a business and doing SEO since kind of 2003. I've done SEO and run a business since 2006. It's trying to have that business mindset behind what are you doing and why are you doing it. So 100% behind having that strategy first approach. And then once you understand what the strategy is clearly, you can get buy-in and you can help to accelerate things forward. So what I would start with is this is a quote that a business mentor to me has said probably a few times, and it's always stuck with me. But if you don't know where you're going, don't complain about where you end up. And this could relate to SEO, this could relate to business, this could relate to life. In general, if you have a plan and you know what you're heading towards, there's much more chance of achieving success. If you are kind of very much going from day to day, then you might end up somewhere great, but equally, if you don't, then as this quote says, you potentially can't really complain about it too much because you didn't really know where you were going. Stuff will change. You'll have to adjust course, of course, but at the same time, you need to understand where it is you're going in order to make it happen. And what I would say is start with the end in mind. So actually starting with a piece of work that we've done over the last 18 months, we've been working with ASICs. And what I would say is the work that we've done, the results that we've achieved, it's all come to fruition from essentially the initial pitch. What was our strategy? Why is it that they chose us? And it was because they saw that we had clearly thought about their problem. We've understood who their customers are, and we've taken an approach which is, this is how we're going to target more of the customers. So from a content strategy perspective, it's very much from awareness to consideration to conversion. But then we're understanding what are the levers to pull from an SEO perspective. Why is it that they're underperforming potentially in some of these categories? And what can we do to move the needle? Because we know if we do achieve that, there's essentially a pot of gold in terms of the organic revenue and business uplift that can achieve. And that's kind of exactly what I'm saying here is understand where that pot of gold lies and then put your effort around how do you secure it, as opposed to there's some issues here, let's fix them and then hope that everything else falls into place. And I think for me, that's really important. You should have that clear strategy in mind in order to execute the work and then deliver upon what it is that you're setting out to achieve. And let's say you're in a client meeting, you think everything's gone really well, we fixed 983 issues, we've gained rankings for 102 keywords, and we secured 52 links. What do you mean, so what? How many people have been in this meeting before? I've definitely been in this meeting quite a few times in the past, and what I've realized is actually the problem isn't the client not understanding what we're doing at all. It's us not understanding their business. We should be putting their business metrics 100% first, and then telling them why this is important related to those business objectives. Otherwise, why should they care? They have a vision, they have a plan that they're trying to execute. If you can help them to achieve that, and SEO is a large part of how you can help them to grow, then that's what you're doing here is 100% essential towards it. But you're speaking the wrong language. And if you're speaking the right language of, we've generated X amount of growth, this is our target to improve, what we're talking about in terms of fixing the issues is how you've done something, but it's not why you did it. So really talking the right language is really important. You have to remember that SEO is an investment in business growth. If you're not growing, there's a very strong argument that you shouldn't be spending money. And at least you need to show what that business impact is. Sometimes there is an argument that maybe if you're on a downward trend and you can stop that trend, definitely keep things going. But you have to show that from a marketing perspective, why should you be investing in SEO versus increasing that spend in other channels? So don't just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. You need to be more targeted and focused around what you're doing. You need to understand and map out where those opportunities lie. Some of SEO is 100% a test and learn experience, but you need to understand what market you're playing in and where it is you're looking to take market share from in order to really progress. And to grow, you need intention. And again, whether this is in SEO, business, life, kind of anything you can relate to, you need to understand where it is you're trying to get to. And I would also argue, break things down. How do you get into a position where you can look at the next step? So you might not necessarily go from 0 to 100. Very rare, if not almost impossible, to get to that point. But you can almost certainly go from 0 to 10. And then you can go from 10 to 20 and 20 to 30. So understanding where you really want to get to is important. And then breaking it down in terms of actionable steps is vital, because you have to know what will take you to that destination that you're seeking. So I like to put this into a framework of 3 clear stages. And those stages are, where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And again, this is a very good business framework, and it relates extremely well to SEO in terms of breaking down that strategy and making it something that is firstly exciting, but secondly achievable, and you've got a plan to make it happen. So it's not just a desired outcome or wish, it's a strategy that you're forming together. So on the first phase of this, where are we now? I would always say, don't create any content before you audit what you have. It's easy to get excited. It's easy to think this would be a great idea, let's just run away and do it. But if you don't know what's working well for you already, how do you know what you should be doing in the future? And there's so much that I think people can learn just from having some patience, taking a look at what it is that has worked for that brand in the past, what hasn't worked, and is there an 80-20 rule you might be missing? I generally feel there's an 80-20 rule for pretty much everything. You can always look at how can you find the 20% of pages that are driving 80% of organic revenue. And it might not be an exact science, but in experience, it's close enough that that should be where you're looking first. And how do you then prioritize by value? You might find there's certain things that you're doing that are working very well. Auditing is a good example of, you will find there's stuff that you created in the past that was very good at that point in time, but you've now reached a point where actually that's no longer doing anything for you. So there's a case for consolidation, there's a case for removing and redirecting content, and really it's understanding about where you are right now. So very much kind of auditing that standpoint from a technical SEO perspective, a content perspective, a link perspective. What's the real problem that you're trying to solve? And again, it can be, people can be too quick to jump in. I think if you understand what that problem is, you have much more chance of really focusing on the right thing to move you forward. There was a stat I saw recently that was something around the lines of 75% of recommendations in an audit are not always going to have an impact. And that's quite terrifying, really. So I think, again, just understanding what it is that's most important to you, and is this something that is good housekeeping, or is this something that's really going to move the needle? And I'm all for good housekeeping, but you want to prioritize by value 100%. Also review the competitive benchmarks. So who's winning, why are they winning, and what are you going to do to catch them? Maybe you're winning, which is great, but in that case, you would want to understand why are you winning and what do you need to do more of to maintain and strengthen that position. More often than not, if there's an appetite to do SEO, it could be because there's a gap that you need to close, and really you need to understand who it is that you're going for, what are the trends that they've done well. If you're trying to catch someone, definitely learning from that will help. If you're trying to beat them, you have to be different. So firstly, understand how you can have the right strategy in place to catch them up. Velocity is really important, and I feel like this is quite often overlooked. If you're in a space where your competitor is making 1,000 changes a month and you're making 4, you are probably not going to catch them up. In fact, it's pretty clear that gap is likely to widen. So understand what is it they're doing. Do they have a smooth technical platform that just means that everything works and they can fix problems very quickly? Are they publishing more content for you that's versus you that's working really well? Are they acquiring more quality links at a stronger pace, etc.? And remember, everything that you're doing is a moving target. If you have a 12-month strategy to get to where your number one competitor in the market is today, don't think that in 12 months' time they're still going to be at that same benchmark, because they're doing stuff alongside you. So that velocity is really important. Otherwise, you could be disappointed when you get to where they are today to find out that they're now streets ahead of what that benchmark was before. So I think that's a really important point to understand when you're putting this strategy together, that not everything is kind of to be taken at face value. You need to understand the pace that people are moving at. Sometimes you could find there's new entrants that you might even overlook, and because they're moving at such a fast pace, they could be ones that really they need to be on your radar as well. That said, you have to focus on your own strengths and build things up as much as you possibly can for yourself. So it's good to know the competitive landscape, but really it's about knowing your own strengths and weaknesses. And definitely don't run before you know you're facing the right direction, because standing still and taking some time and understanding which way is it that you really want to go and picking your battles, I would argue that patience will be paid off for. Have the right strategy approach. I find I do this if I'm walking down the street. I normally have to, I'll quite often get lost. I'll end up using a map. And if I'm going in completely the wrong direction without the map, it might take me a while to figure this out. And it is exactly the same thing here. And I think really you want to understand exactly where it is that you want to get to, and then you can put all of that effort behind making it happen. So there's definitely more to dig into in that phase, but I think in order to summarize, the next step really is, where are we going? And from this perspective, this is something that I created a few years ago in order to demonstrate the value to clients. And what I was trying to do is, from the initial conversations, understand what are their business goals? What is it that they're really trying to achieve? How do they make money, essentially? And sometimes if it's e-commerce or travel, it can be very easy to correlate back to money because there's a direct transaction on the website. It's not always organic revenue. It could be lead gen. Lead gen in itself is potentially more of a game of quality as opposed to quantity. So again, there's different metrics of success, and trying to nail what it is that you're really going for first and foremost is most important, because again, I think you'll quite often find that people may share our visibility is going up. That's great, but what if it's the wrong type of traffic? What if that traffic isn't the target audience and potential customers that you're going for? Then maybe that's not always what you should be trying to achieve. So my first tip here is to pick one big goal and make that as business focused as possible. There's a client that we've done a lot of work with who they wanted to improve organic traffic and organic revenue. And I remember at the time I told them to pick one that was the most important, because there's two different strategies. If you're focusing on how to get traffic, you're looking at high volume search terms and maybe a long tail of traffic that you can attract. If you're focusing on revenue, you're looking at prioritizing by value on your top converting keywords, products, high value items, etc. And in the end, we decided that the most sensible business metric was organic revenue. Our traffic went up, and it was something like 10 to 20%. It was an okay result, but it wasn't a headline grabbing, this is an amazing success. The revenue went up by over 100%. And that's the sort of result that I would argue that you're looking for here, is how do you not get too excited in some ways by the wrong metrics. And once you understand those business goals, you can then work downwards. So definitely start from the top down. What makes you money? What type of traffic makes you money? What type of rankings drive that traffic? And then you can turn that into a strategy from the bottom up. So how do you have a solid SEO platform from a technical perspective to build from? How do you have the right content strategy that's targeting the searches that your customers are looking for? How do you strengthen your link reputation with digital PR coverage to get you into the point that you have the authority to deserve to rank against your competitors? Then those rankings that you're generating off the back of this combined approach will turn into traffic, and that traffic turns into money. The secret for this is you have to start from the top down. Otherwise, you can get all the way up to rankings and traffic and just be disappointed. So if it's laser focused on where do you make money, and then you can put all of your effort behind making more money, the chances are that you're going to excite the people who are holding the budget. You also need to understand the size of the market that you want to take and the size of the opportunity. So again, organic visibility, I think, is a good comparative metric versus competitors. However, it's not always the slice of the market that you're going for. Let's say your ASICS is a good example, actually, for a sports retailer. If you're competing against Amazon, you don't need to know Amazon's overall market share. ASICS is a good example of that. They're not going to launch a line of toiletries or toys, but they are going to double down on running and sportswear. So how do you understand that section of the market that you really want to grow in? And then how do you take that forward? And then you're measuring the part that you really care about, you're ignoring the part that you don't really care about. So then there's tools on the market that are great for visibility, the likes of Systrix, Searchmetrics, SEMrush, etc. What we use quite commonly is SEO Monitor, and again, definitely use the tool that you prefer. But what I would argue here is the key thing is how do you break that into keyword groups and have a product-led approach behind breaking it down, showing the forecast of the opportunity, and then putting all your efforts behind making that happen in a measurable way. So to reiterate this point, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. And I think this is really important. Again, I really feel like I'm trying to advocate from an SEO perspective. Don't just jump in feet first, and really understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. And then you will get to this stage of how we're going to get there. So this is where it gets exciting. This is, I find, where people quite often start, which is why I don't think you can start at this stage. There's just no context. And everyone we'll always tell you SEO is changing all the time, and it is. Definitely tactically, it's changing. The competitive landscape will always be in flux. However, I started doing SEO in 2003, and at that point in time, the reason why I did SEO was to generate more customers and business for our clients from organic search, making them more visible to search engines, and the free organic growth drivers to drive growth were technical SEO, on-site content, and link reputation. I don't think that's changed at all in 17 years, and I don't see it changing too much in the future. I think the weighting behind this may always vary. However, these are the fundamental things that you really need to build strength in each of the three pillars in order to make sure that you're growing in the right direction. So in terms of how to get there, this is how you want to structure your efforts, your team, your agency behind how do you be as strong as possible relative to the market that you're in each of these three key pillars. And once you understand, is there a weakness in one? And again, everything is relative to that market. You're not trying to have a link reputation that is stronger than the BBC unless you're competing with the BBC. So you have to understand what it is that you're going for, what those marketplace benchmarks look like, and then build the plan of how you can grow from there, essentially. So create a laser focused plan. It has to be laser focused in the sense of where that section of the market is. So like I was saying, with SEO Monitor, as a good example, if you have keyword groups and topics, you can understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. So break things down so that you can start small, but then aim big and scale once you've proved a point. So you can understand that this is working extremely well for you for a certain category, or it could even be an individual product. How do you apply those learnings across the board and then try to make that more widespread? Have a SMART goal, so understand exactly what it is that you're trying to do in a very measurable way that shows that you're making progress. Assign accountability, so something that we have across our team is a RACI, which stands for responsibility, accountability, consulted, and informed. And the reason for doing that is so that everyone in the team knows who's accountable. As soon as you have accountability for two people for one role, there's a good chance that no one will do it. So understand who is accountable, assign responsibility where it's due alongside that, but there's someone that is putting their hat on, this is what we're doing. So if you go back to the free organic growth drivers, you might want to have, and I would definitely recommend doing this, having different people involved as being accountable for technical SEO, on-site content, and digital PR. And then work in deployment sprints to test and learn. So as much as you definitely want to have a long-term plan, you know where you're going, you need to check in. SEO is definitely a longer-term investment versus other channels for sure, but at the same time, it's not a blind leap of faith. You have to show that there's progress that's being made at every stage of the journey. And based upon where you are, you need to be showing that this is what we've done, this is what has worked, this is what hasn't worked, how are we going to make improvements based upon that, and then from there we can iterate and improve and roll out the next learnings. And again, SEO is never done. There is no finish line, I guess, to steal a phrase from Nike, but it's definitely one of those tasks where I've seen a site that's close to this, but very rarely seen a site that ranks #1 for absolutely every keyword within their market. There's some that are very close. There's not many that completely dominate, and there's always room to improve. Even at that point, you could say, okay, well, how do we generate more awareness? How do we go for content gaps that we haven't thought of before? There's always more that you can be doing, and breaking that down into deployment sprints is a very good way to get the team focused behind what it is you're really trying to achieve. And it's a much more effective way to get buy-in, because then you can show that what you're doing is working at a certain scale, and then you can take that further forward based upon the results. Also measure what matters, not what's easiest. We can quite often say, here's some metrics in analytics, here's some rankings, here's your domain authority or link metrics, etc. That must be good, right? And what I would say is, firstly, you should start by understanding what the business values, most importantly, and then understand what the lead and the lag indicators are behind that. So what is it that are the levers that you should pull versus ignore? In this case, I would argue that the big goals that you're going for would be organic revenue more often than not. I would argue that actually organic traffic, organic visibility, they're potentially showing that you're going in the right direction, but it has to be generating revenue to get there. So if you've got traffic for the keywords that you know that will convert, but they're sat on page 2, that's great. It's showing that you're going the right way, but it's not business success at this stage. So understand what it is that you're achieving, but also understand what levers you need to pull more of. So whether that's from a technical SEO perspective, do you want to reduce page errors, maybe make Search Console a lot cleaner, certainly in terms of how Google is viewing your website is normally a very good place to start. Are you publishing more content? Is that working for you? The links that you're acquiring in terms of quality and quantity, is that working? Is it working is a good question, because sometimes you can just jump to the conclusion that we've been featured on high quality authority publishers, therefore that must be good for SEO. And actually you want to sense check that, and you want to understand, is that right? Sometimes there's a better approach. Sometimes you need less links. You might need more topical relevance. You might need links that go to the right destination as opposed to the domain or a campaign. And although link building could be something that you need to do in order to win, you might be approaching it the wrong way. So definitely don't just assume that because we're getting links and they're going to the sites, that must be good for our SEO, because it's you want to see it in the sense of the traffic, the rankings, and the revenue that are going up that is behind that and can be attributed to that activity. At the risk of, again, kind of sounding very dull in terms of how you break this down, the biggest wins in my career are very rarely the big spikes, and it's more often than not the month on month on month, year on year progress, where you've got something that you know works, you improve it, you roll it out, you scale it, you continually improve, and from there the small wins add up collectively into big wins. That's definitely where I've seen, if we've grown organic revenue, for example, by 100+%, which has happened a few times with a number of clients, it's very rarely the spikes that, even if we've done an audit and it's had an impact, that may cause a big spike, which is great, but it's normally the continued effort, that continuous pressure that you're applying to your SEO activity that's paying off. The campaign that generates you lots of coverage and gets a spike is great in the moment. It's probably taken you forward, or you'd like to think it's taken you further forward to your longer term goals, but in itself, on its own, it has to be more of a sustained effort. And that's definitely what I would see here in terms of the success of what you're trying to achieve. So to summarize, the approach for this really is, number 1, where are we now? Number 2, where are we going? And number 3, how are we going to get there? That's how you form a plan. That's how you understand the business that you're working with. And that's how at the end of this, when you're sat down having that meeting and you're saying, we've done a great job, you know you have, because you're 100% aligned in what success looks like. If you know what that looks like from the start and you've made it happen, then as long as you have a fair and reasonable client or boss that you're working with, then that conversation is going to go extremely well. But alignment is key. You have to make sure that your ideas have maximum value towards hitting the goals that matter most. Otherwise, you're focusing that effort in the wrong direction. And in order to do that, one thing that I think I took this away from Seth Godin a while ago from an interview I saw with him, but he said, what's the easiest way to hit your target? Do that. And again, this sounds so simple, but again, you kind of have to, sometimes it doesn't have to be as complex as it needs to be. And I think in order to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, the bells and whistles are exciting, but do that afterwards. Do whatever it takes in the easiest way possible to hit your targets first, and then you can worry about everything else afterwards. But do what's required to do the job. And again, it sounds very simple, but that's what makes success happen. And to end with a good example of, again, showing this in action and how this works, is breaking down where that growth comes from. So we've had a strategy with World Remit, who we've worked with for the last 3 years. And every time that we look at kind of how do we form a new strategy, it's normally developing the old strategy, but taking it further forward. So how do we now open up new opportunities? Where's that next opportunity to unlock organic growth? And once we understand where that opportunity is, we then understand the strengths and weaknesses. We optimize around where we see that growth coming from and making sure that they're as strong as possible in all of the key factors that can drive organic growth. And in this case, we've had significant results. So this is just from the last 12 months of 52%, but I think we've hit on average over 50% increase in organic revenue year on year for 3 years running. And that happens because you're always thinking about, where does that organic revenue come from? What is it that we're going to do to secure it? And just breaking things down step by step in a way that you can make it happen. So thanks very much for listening. And I think we've got a little bit of time left over for some questions.
Yes, we do. I've got a couple of questions from the chat. First is from Simon Cox. What do you do when the client contact asking for the SEO audit is more interested in a tick box exercise to achieve their own annual targets rather than how SEO could improve the business's bottom line, asking for a friend?
So I ask them questions about themselves and their business. So I ask them the type of questions that are more about where it is that they would like to be in, let's say it's 3 years' time. What is it that success looks like, and what is it that would make you happy? That's kind of quite often a question that I would ask at any start of an engagement. And I think that can help to understand the level of the ambition, and then turn that conversation from something that's more tactical into something that's more strategic. And then from there, that can flow into, okay, well, how are you going to get there? What obstacles are potentially in the way, et cetera, et cetera. But it helps you to form that plan. Also, as part of any audit, I would always look at the opportunity. So what's the run a forecast based on keyword research for that market? And if you can understand how many, not just searches, but how much kind of market share you can acquire in terms of monthly traffic and what that equates to in terms of revenue, that helps to, again, move that conversation towards something that is more business focused as well. So those would be my tips. I'd caveat it with, sometimes you need to pre-qualify out some people that you just simply can't help. So I would try to gear the conversation that way as much as possible. And in some cases, you might want to say, okay, well, actually, I'm not sure we can help you in this situation, but try to make it work first by asking them the business focused questions. Oh, I can't hear you, Dave.
Barry Adam asks, what do you make of the increasing trend that sees websites less as destinations for people to get to and more as data sources for bigger platforms? So, for example, direct questions on Google and then so on. Do you think that more sites are going to be created with that intention in mind?
So I wrote a blog post, I think this was at least 2 years ago now, about how the future of the internet could be with no websites. And it caused a bit of, not sure controversy, but split opinions. And where I was trying to get to with that is, I think sometimes you can look too closely at algorithms and the latest update and what's changed, and not far enough definitely into the future, but also user behavior. And I wrote that piece after thinking about how do users search, and it used to be desktop, 10 blue links, etc. And now what we have is high mobile usage. We have featured snippets that give you results before you need to click. We have voice search that is definitely increasing in popularity, but I wouldn't say it's definitely hasn't reached the hype that people were talking about kind of a couple of years ago. But that said, it's still something that from a user behavior perspective, the trends are shifting. So from that perspective, if you can find, like weather data is a perfect example, if you can find weather in Google and you're the data source for that, but you're not getting the click through to your website, then absolutely, I think that's certainly something to be mindful of in terms of what you're trying to achieve. You also have to adjust your metrics of success, because from a branding perspective, if people see you, that might be the best that you're going to get from an impression perspective, as opposed to the website traffic that's coming through. So I think it's natural to expect that things will go more that way. And then you kind of have a choice. Do you play the game and provide the data and allow Google to access that data and display it in the way that they want to, or you don't have to? So yeah, my advice would be it's a trend that is heading that way, and then you make your own call on if that's a good business decision for you.
Fantastic. And one more from me. If someone was entering a search awards category, and as a winner yourself plenty of times in the past, what items or words would you expect to see regularly in the section titled strategy, knowing that elsewhere they've mentioned objectives and audience?
Money. So from my perspective, it's always, I've judged like the US search awards as well, so I've seen things from the other side, and it's all about, it's a marketing investment. So it's about the ROI that you're generating. If you've spent a significant investment, you would expect to see a strong return from that, from what you're doing. And if that strategy is geared around how you can make more money, then you want to, firstly, you need to understand the customers and the audience, but you need to understand their intent behind what it is they're looking to purchase. And the strategy really should be pinpointing how do we acquire more customers. And if you can show that, there's certainly something we try to get across in all of our entries, is understanding how is it that we're going to help drive meaningful organic growth for our clients. And if you can put a pound symbol next to that, I just think, firstly, to try and get that signed off from a client is much more powerful. And even from an award perspective of showing the value of what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think, again, it's a stronger way to get that across.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks very much, Kevin, for a really insightful talk and proving that I'm teaching the right things back at the uni. I think we've all got to run off to our next session now. So I think everyone has to type the word claps into the chat to demonstrate our appreciation. But it's golf claps from me anyway.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, folks. Take care, and we'll see you on the next thing.